here? I own a Rolex watch, for heaven's sake. What's this all about? I know that sounds silly, but I was kind of in that space. I'm crying. I'm talking to myself. People are walking by. I'm surprised somebody didn't call mental health. I finally pulled it together, finished the project. Went home. It was about 10 o'clock at night when I left. It was an hour-long drive. Took a shower. Climbed into bed. Couldn't sleep. And I couldn't get the stink off. I wasn't sure that it was what I was standing in or whether it was my soul that had just rotted to that point. I just know I got up. I went into my closet, got down on my knees, and prayed like I'd never prayed before. And I started to feel something down inside my soul, deep, deep. The only time I'd felt that before, when I was a teenager, I was a prodigal son. That moment when you're metaphorically feeding the pigs and you decide to go home, that's before you see the robe and the slippers and the ring and the fatted calf being killed and all that symbolism of how glorious it will be when you come back. I was in that space. That's the only time I'd felt it that deep. It was like God cut my heart open with a dull knife, a hot one, reached in, yanked out my proud heart, gave me a heart transplant, and the journey began. We moved from California to Utah, where we'd been editing all of our films. I wasn't totally rotten inside. We did a film on drinking and driving that was in 30,000 schools, acquaintance rape, child abuse prevention, 3-part series. It was on every U.S. military base in the world, every DOD school system, and 30,000 school systems, the U.S., Canada, New Zealand, Australia. I decided that's what I wanted to do. I want to go do those kinds of things that are meaningful. And we packed up everything and we left. I'm crying, leaving our dream home, which we fortunately sold. And Ramona's in the 12-passenger Ford van with our 7 children singing camp songs. We got here to Utah, and 2 years later, it got even darker. We had sold everything that we could sell. We were selling our last antique. I loved antiques, really nice antiques. And we were selling our last antique. And I said, "Oh, sweetheart, my heart just breaks to have to sell this." And she says, "I'm okay with it." I said, "What do you mean?" She says, "Well, I don't really like antiques." I said, "Really?" Yeah, she said, "I don't care how old it is. I just want the drawers to work." When we got to Utah, she took off her 3.01 carat, almost investment grade diamond and handed it to me and said, "Sweetheart, sell this. I don't need it anymore. Let's get home." Back in San Diego, when we let the gardener go, she said, "Oh, good, the boys can learn how to mow the lawn." We both did when we were kids. Let the housekeeper go, she said, "Good, they could make their own beds, and I get my kitchen back." But 2 years in, the sale of all those educational films came to an abrupt halt because of some legislation. And I was really done. And one night, it got so dark, that I walked right to the edge of mortality. You see, I had a life insurance policy that was going to lapse in a few days. And there was enough to solve all those problems, to put the family back in good stead. It took me 4 days to write the note to have it make any sense at all. But I didn't do it. What drew me back was Ramona ran the St. George Marathon. And when she was done, she came to the fence that separated the runners from the group, and we held fingers in between that fence, and we just wept. And I thought, this has got to be what it's like when we pass to the next life. Just one of those moments. Those are the moments that kept me from going over. Except for when the sun came up, I was angry. And this is what I said. I long to cry to the God of my youth. But the God of my youth will not hear my cry. I must change my God or change my cry. Anybody want to guess which one got changed? I wanted to be rescued. I learned some powerful principles in the years that would come. There is no rescue, but there is an amazing gift that we're giving. Here we go. Just go to the next slide, please, if you would. In 2000, I paid off the last $14,000 from that debt. I didn't think that day would ever come. It was $1 million. That's how much I owed. $1 million. Last $14,000 bank note to the bank. Done. I can tell you that night that I got down on my knees and I just was so overwhelmed with joy. It was a little unexpected what happened. Because I had this very strong impression come into my heart. And this is what it was. David, what did you learn? I was thinking, was this just a classroom? Well, that was a tough classroom. But I knew what I'd learned. May I share it with you? You open the doors of opportunity, I do the work. When I try to open them up, I frustrate the program. When I try to get you to do the work, I frustrate the program. You open the doors, I do the work. In your notes, before the day's out, I want you to write down every opportunity that you currently have open that comes to your mind. Every opportunity that comes to your mind. And ask yourself this question. Have I cleaned out every corner in that room called an opportunity? Have I swept it absolutely clean? Because I know that when I make that list, and I've done it often, I'm like you, I wake up every morning unemployed. What I eat, where I sleep, the cars I drive, all dependent on the results that are created. This is a great way to live. It is a thrilling way to live. Results are king. And when it feels like something's not working right, I make a list of all the opportunities, and I ask myself that question. Have I addressed every single one of them completely? And I've never been able to say yes. So guess where we focus? Cleaning out every corner of every opportunity. And guess what happens? Another door opens. My promise to you is exactly the same. If you ever get discouraged, make a list of every lead, every idea, every person. Have I called them back? Have I followed through? Did I go to that meeting? Am I doing what I know is required? And if not, then go do that. And you'll watch another door open up. When I became the CEO of the Og Mandino Group, I'm standing in the cancellation line of the Lion King. I was shooting some commercials for CNBC. And my phone rings. It's Betty Mandino. She said, the rights to the greatest salesman are not being renewed. I want to call you first. Would you be interested? To which I said, Betty, is this a rhetorical question? Because Og had helped me through those dark years. His words. Greatest salesman in the world. I hope you've read it. If you haven't, you want to get a copy. Powerful principles. And the foundation of our coaching program. And while I stood in the cancellation line, we talked to Betty's attorney in New York, the publisher in Florida, our attorney in California, and the decision was we would be starting a new company. I would become the CEO, and we would take Og's principles in the 21st century, and the first thing we looked for was measurement. Measurement. Og's principles drilled down on the thought processes we want to shift, But the question is, which thought processes have a challenge? There are powerful assessments. Maybe you've taken one, a DISC or a Myers-Briggs. They're called inductive science. Their purpose is to induce a diagnosis. Yes, you're a high D. Yes, you're an ISNF. Very powerful, beautiful concepts for identifying behavioral tendencies and personality. But I want to go below the surface of all that. There's got to be a way to measure the thought processes that drive the personality. And we found it at the University of Tennessee. We spent 14 years perfecting it. Oh, if we had time, I'd tell you some miracles that happened along the way. Insights that came to make it possible. How do you present something to someone that has 6.4 quadrillion variables? First of all, you got to program it. And then you got to make it make sense to the person who is actually taking the assessment. Well, it's now available. Scott Schreier. Scott, where are you? Would you stand up so everybody can see you? Scott, right there in the back. Scott would love to meet with every one of you and help you sort this piece out. Because once we know, then we can apply the principles and practices and processes that will shift your life. I want to take just a minute and share with you 2 or 3 of the key things we've discovered through this process. That be okay? 5,700 people that I've assessed that are entrepreneurs. You can write this down, 98% to a mathematical certainty. I know if everybody here took an assessment, we've got enough people here for a scientific sample, we'd have 98% of you have very high levels of empathy. That means you're very accurate in your intuitive input about a person. The question is, are you using it in a way that would allow you to connect with them? The very first thing Scott will teach you in the coaching program is called intrinsic validation. How to use your gift of intuition to step into a person's world. Listen, bring your empathetic experience, your life experiences, to ask questions that'll bring down walls of resistance. Because if you're trying to sell somebody something, whether it's a listing or a house, and you're throwing up all over their walls, or you're trying to take it down with some clever sales technique, or you are being strategic, listening, but waiting for that moment to jump on them like a fox on a mouse. That's not an indictment. It's just we all can do it, right? Anybody ever thrown up on somebody's wall? You're so excited. And blah, blah, blah. Splashes back. Tastes awful. Vomit has a tendency to be that way. We project, it gets rejected. It's not the person, it's their wall. Can we care enough about a person to get the wall down? And how do you get the wall down? Because till it's down, connection cannot occur other than superficially. And to a person, you've got the gift. Are you using it constructively? Now here's the one that drove the writing of the book. 97% of you have the ability to vividly visualize at a very high level. And I hear this all the time. Well, I don't visualize, Dave. I said, let me define it for you. Visualization is any time where your mind is somewhere else other than your body. Anybody have that challenge? Yeah. 97% of you do it at a very high level. You may or may not have discipline to even know what you're thinking about. But I can tell you that with the thought processes you have, you will absolutely want to be hyper-vigilant and know what you're thinking and choose to think in ways that will serve. Because if you don't, the default mechanism for this thought process is fantasy. That means we go into the future when all the money's been made and we start spending it. You list a house. It's $1 million residence. What's the commission? 30 grand net, right? Oh, so there's a risk that in our private moments we might think about what it's going to be like when we sell it. That's okay, because then if we came back here and started focusing on all the details of how to get it sold, that would be great, wouldn't it? The risk with this thought process is we go to the 30 and we creep out here to the furniture store in our mind. We want to have real money in a real bank account with which to buy a real couch, a real one, not a fantasy couch, fantasy carpet, fantasy car, fantasy better house. And with your thought process, your mind is creating a whole new reality. Norepinephrine coursing through your body. Could you feel it? Oh. Challenge. Reality shows up differently. You hear from the appraiser. Who invented this latest appraisal system? They pick somebody. It's like, okay, who's the biggest idiot we can get to do this one? Anybody had that? No offense to appraisers. Just that seems to be the case. Or the title insurance company. You represent the buyer, and you find out the seller's fence is 5 inches over on the neighbor's yard, and he never told you, and they're going to sue. What does that do? Yanks you right back over here, and we go into the other place, the dark dungeon of despair and discouragement. And we spin around in here, and spin means to spiral downward. And then we start reacting. Well, life is over. I might as well sell my house. I should shut down my business. How am I going to pay my overhead? Nobody's been here, have you? It's all over. I'm going to be homeless. Well, your mind is creating that just as real as it was the fantasy. And now you start writing emails, making decisions based on how you're feeling, based on how you're thinking. I wrote the book for this reason. Unrealistic expectations. Because of this gift you have to vividly visualize and using it destructively, we create this expectation. Life shows up differently and we hate our life. And what's the human tendency? To turn inward. And we start questioning our worth and our worthiness and our beliefs. I have heard too many times from grown men and women, I can almost touch it. I can almost taste it. Why can't I have it? What's wrong with me? And in most serious cases, does God not love me? If you ever experienced that cycle, you're going to want to know how to use the gift of vivid visualization constructively 5 specific ways. Because if you will, you'll be engaged in life. You'll be embracing principles. You'll be connecting and serving and creating value and contributing to the world. You'll be getting inspired ideas of such magnitude. If I had you wired to a functional MRI, we would see parts of your brain light up that are normally dormant. Wow! Passion is the gift we're given to do the work of creation. Nobody gets to skip it. Nobody gets to skip it. It's either boring, mundane, repetitious, and burdensome,